Alright guys, so we're back with another video. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys how to set up GraphQL. So far we've already done a lot. We've set up the authentication layer. We've set up the users part over here. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this users module because we're not really going to be doing anything with this. And everything else that we're going to be doing is going to be GraphQL first, which means that we're not going to be doing anything with HTTP. We're only going to be using GraphQL. Okay, so let me just delete this users module. We're not going to need it anymore. And everything should also work just fine. Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set up GraphQL. So let me go ahead and just head over to the documentation and show you where you can just find a reference. So we're going to go to Quick Start. And what we're going to do is we're just going to install all of these dependencies. Okay, so I'm just copy this. And we're going to go ahead and let me just exit from my SQL because I'm not going to need to worry about that anymore. Get rid of that. Yarn add. And let's add all of these. So it should take a couple seconds. Shouldn't take too long, especially if you're using Yarn. Okay. Let's give it some time. Now, the nice thing about GraphQL is it works really, really well with type ORM. Okay, they're both very powerful together. So let me actually restart the server because we just installed a lot of stuff. So we need to, restart everything all over again. It should be fine. Yep, perfect. Yeah, those things usually happen sometimes when you are installing a lot of dependencies, but it's fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up GraphQL. It should be very easy. Okay, the documentation has everything that we need. All we need to do is just import the GraphQL module into the app module. Really easy. So we're going to go over to app module, and we're going to go ahead and import GraphQL module from NestJS GraphQL. Just make sure I type this correctly. Okay, perfect. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to go, and I'll probably do that right over here, GraphQL module for root. Perfect. Okay, that's good. And now you can see that we're getting an error. It says it requires an existing schema. Okay, and that's fine. We're going to create that. Okay, don't worry. So by default, GraphQL comes with a playground that we can use to make requests. It's basically just a GraphQL client that looks really cool. I like it. Yeah, it looks like this right over here. So what we're going to do is we first need to set up our schema file. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right over to here. And we're going to specify our type paths. So we're going to go over here and we're going to say type paths. And we're going to pass in this glob. That's what it's called, a glob. So it's going to be a pattern. So we want to get every single .graphql file. And we need definitions. So for definitions, we will do path. And we want to get we want our definitions to be generated to the graphql.ts file. So what this definitions property does is it'll basically allow, so first of all, we can create our GraphQL types, and then it's going to take those types and it's going to generate it into class. You can actually read over here. It says you'll typically also need to have TypeScript definitions, classes, and interfaces that correspond to the GraphQL's schema. I think that's SDL stands for Schema Definition Language. So creating the corresponding TypeScript definitions by hand is redundant and tedious. So you can see over here they have a package. The NestJS GraphQL package will automatically generate TypeScript definitions using the abstract syntax tree AST. Okay, so we can enable that feature by simply just specifying the definitions options property. So we're going to use the path property, and we're going to just do the join function. That's coming from path. Okay. And we're going to get the current working directory. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and join that with source GraphQL.ts. We want this to be inside the GraphQL.ts file. If it's not, you're actually going to get an error. I know I was getting an error because it actually got generated inside the main directory and not inside source. So just make sure you do that. Okay, but right now it's not generating anything because we haven't created anything yet. So I'm going to create a new folder called GraphQL schema, or I'll call it index.graphql. Okay, so there we go. And let's just save this. So one thing I will mention is that any changes you make to a GraphQL file won't affect the hot reload. I'm not sure if there's a workaround, because I know in the documentation they did say somewhere that you can't do that. Okay, so now we just need to define our root stuff. So we need to type query, and we'll also have a mutation. Okay. So let's just do that real quick. And you can see even if I save, it's not going to work. So I have to actually save here. Okay. So it says GraphQL error, syntax error, expected name found, nothing. So we need to actually, let me get rid of the mutation because I'm only going to use a query for now. So let's do get user, and we're going to return a user from this with this query. And let me go ahead and just go ahead and create a schema. Actually, no, I think I'm not going to do that. I think I'll do, maybe I'll just create everything inside here. Type user. And we'll do name string. All right. So if you're not familiar with GraphQL, don't worry. I'll leave some links in the description where you can learn about GraphQL. Or maybe I might have, I think by the time I upload this video, I might have a GraphQL series already released, so you guys can reference that. Anyways, all right, so that's fine. And now let's look over here inside the source folder. We have this graphql.ts file, and you can see it's automatically generated, which is nice. So we have our queries, we have our user. Now let's go ahead and go to our localhost port 3001. And right now, let's go over to the GraphQL endpoint. So this is the GraphQL Playground, which is just a GraphQL client. Okay, and you can see right over here, if I go over to schema, you can see we have our schema. So we have our root query, and we also have our user. Okay, so I can get the user, and then I can give it the name. Okay, that's currently the only field that we have. Okay, but we can add more. Let's see what else. Let's add some more. Let's add, let's see. So we have, let's actually make this look like our Discord model. So we have username, we have Discord ID, which is an ID. You can also make it a string too, if you want. I think by default, the ID is just really a string anyways. Avatar will be a string. And then we have discriminator. String. Okay, so this exclamation mark basically means that it's non-nullable, which means that it has to return something that's non-null. Now with the avatar, I have this set to, this could be nullable because the user may not have an avatar, so that's okay. But things like the username, the ID, and the discriminator should be non-nullable. Okay, so let's go ahead and if I actually save this, you'll see that it'll actually get auto-generated again. Yep, you can see that it got auto-generated. That's great. So you can basically use this over and over again. So I think actually, yeah, I think this is fine. Okay, so let's refresh. And now you can see in the schema, you'll see that we have all of the stuff over here. We have discriminator, we have avatar, we have username, and we have Discord ID. And that's good. Okay, so with GraphQL, we can use GraphQL to pretty much query data. It's really good when you have a lot of relational data and you want to find a way to retrieve everything all at once. And GraphQL itself is really good to, manage data and manage what you want to, send back to the user. Let's say, for example, internally in your database, you're saving things like access and refresh tokens. You don't want to send that back to the user at all. So what you can do is you can create a type, and you can create a type user, and you can omit the access and refresh token, but in the database, you'll have them. Okay, so whenever they query the user from your GraphQL API, they will never be able to get the access token at all. They'll only ever be able to get all of these fields. Okay, with GraphQL, you can query what you ask for. So if you want the name, it'll give you the name. If you want the ID, it'll give you the ID. Okay, you don't need to get, everything. In a REST API, it'll give you everything. Okay, in a GraphQL API, it'll give you what you ask for. Okay, so that's going to be pretty much it with setting up GraphQL. Setting up the schemas, that is. We need to also set up a resolver so we can actually, get data back. So this is going to be fairly simple. I'm going to go ahead and just create a new file, and I'm actually going to create a folder called resolvers, and I'll just create, I'll create a user resolver.ts. Okay, this is going to be fairly simple. Again, if you get stuck, they have documentation that shows you how to do everything. It's really easy. I really like the documentation. Okay, but you can see they have a simple example right over here. So we're going to go ahead and export a class called user resolver. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and label this as a resolver. And this resolver, we're going to just call this, oh wait, that's the wrong resolver package. It came from DNS package. Resolve, we want this to come from type ORM, not type ORM, GraphQL, sorry. Yep, perfect. And we're going to name this user. Okay, perfect. And inside this resolver, you can kind of think of this resolver like the controller. So this is where you can get all of your constructors. Okay, very, very simple stuff. Or like you can import all, you can inject all of your services. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use the query. So remember, this query is going to come from the GraphQL package. Okay. There is a query function that comes from NestJS common. Just make sure that you're getting the one from GraphQL. If you do need two, if you do need both of them together, which is very unlikely, just make sure you change the name. Okay, but this should be fine though. So we're going to query, and this query is going to be get user, I think. Yep. And async get user. And this is just going to return a user. So we're going to return a user. And I'll just return just a simple user. So discriminator 123, discriminator 1234, username Arizona, and we're missing the avatar, which is going to be undefined. Okay, so what's going over here? Yeah, promise user. Okay, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to do this. Obviously, you'd want to fetch this from the database. Okay, so now let's go over to module, and we need to actually add this as a provider. So I think the best thing to do would be to actually create a GraphQL module itself and then import it. So that way I don't have to do this. But for now, I'll just do this. We'll fix that later. So let's get the resolver. So the resolver should be fine. Great. Now let's try to get some data. Okay, so you can see that right now it's giving us an error because we don't have name. We have username. So let's get that. And there we go. We get Arizona, Discord ID, avatar, discriminator. What else? Are we missing something? Oh, I got Discord ID duplicate. It should have been avatar and then discriminator. And obviously right now this is returning just fake data over here. Ideally, what you'd want to do is you'd want to, again, go into your constructor and you'd want to inject your service. Okay, so you can inject it from wherever. Right now we have this auth service, so you typically, like I said, this auth module, we typically don't want to touch this at all. We don't want to import anything from here. So I think the better thing to do is we can create our own services and we can just inject them into here. But yeah, that's pretty much all it is to it, like really. Let me actually do this real quick. Let me actually do this. Just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and just inject this auth service real quick. Okay, but again, like I said, I would personally not do this. I'll just create a new service because I want to keep auth service separate. Okay, but let's just inject auth service, private read only, auth service, authentication provider, and I think we might get an error. Yep, that's fine. It's because it's saying if auth service is a provider, is it part of the app module? That's okay. So you can see in the app module, we do import auth module, but in auth module, we aren't exporting the auth service, which is a problem. So if we do want to use this, if we do want to export it, if we do want to import it other places, we do need to export it. So that should fix that. All right, so now what I'm going to do, and just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and reference auth service. So const user equals await this dot auth user dot find user, and we need to actually get the Discord ID. Okay, now how do we actually get the Discord ID though? So over here, we actually need to get the current logged in user. Okay, so in NestJS, it actually uses its own. In NestJS by default, not by default, but like we wrote our own guards, the Discord auth guard and the authenticated guard. With the GraphQL, we can actually write our own. guard for GraphQL, because GraphQL uses it sends different data, so we can actually create a custom guard for GraphQL. Okay, so that GraphQL guard will pretty much be responsible for protecting our GraphQL endpoints. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just do this. I'm going to create a custom decorator, so I can actually get the user. I can actually get the user from the context. So let's see. Let me do this over here. Current user. Import that and then import GQL execution context. And this is going to get the user from the context. And oh wait, I did it in the wrong place. Whoops. I wanted to do this inside here just for now. I'm just gonna leave it there just temporarily. In future videos, we'll put this in its own decorator folder. Okay, so let's do that, and let's go ahead and do current user, and let's console log this user real quick. Let me just do this. Okay, so we are logged in currently. We should be logged in. Okay, perfect. So since we are on the same domain, we should have the same cookie. We should have the same cookie. And I also need to mention this. You need to make sure in your GraphQL Playground, you go into the settings, make sure requests.credentials is set to include. By default, it's set to omit, which means that it won't send the cookie, which means that every request you make will be unauthenticated. So make sure you set include so that it will send the cookie. Let me just double check to make sure the cookie is valid. Let's see, that's fine. Okay, we should be okay. All right, so if I were to do this, it's going to return null. That's because we are manually returning null, but you can see over here that we do have the user. Let me just make sure, where else am I console logging? Because I just want to make sure I am console logging only in certain places. Let me just figure this out real quick. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. User. Okay, let's try this again. I just want to make sure. So it's giving us undefined for some reason. Okay, so actually I realized that this is the wrong decorator. Probably shouldn't have to copy paste that. Okay, so I'm gonna use a decorator that I had created. So const ctx equals actually I'm gonna name this context. Okay, and let's do const ctx equals GQL execution context. We're gonna create the context. And we're going to do return ctx.get context rec.user. So before I had this, oh yeah, I did .user. It should be .rec.user. There we go. Okay, that should fix our issue. All right, perfect. All right, there we go. So now that's how we can actually ensure that we get the current user that is authenticated. Okay, now if the user is not authenticated, so let me just clear the cookie real quick. If I were to do this, it's going to return null, which is okay. But what we'll do also is we'll create a guard as well. So I'll create a GraphQL guard, and this is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to just do this. Injectable export class GraphQL auth guard implements, and then can activate. And then we just simply implement this method with the context. And again, it's just really similar to the previous guard. We simply just say, hey, look, let's create a context called context GQL execution context dot create. Okay, that gets imported up top over there from NestJS GraphQL. See, GQL execution context. Okay, we call the dot create method, and then we pass in the context. And then we just simply do return ctx get context .rec.user. Okay, and now I can use this GraphQL guard, and I can do this. I either protect a certain query, or I can protect the entire, I can protect everything. So use guards, GraphQL auth guard. Okay, and if I do this, you're going to see it's going to give us a forbidden resource. And if I refresh, logged out, let's go and log in again. So let's authorize. So I wonder if the actual cookie, okay, so that cookie actually got updated. Great, great, perfect. So now if I do this, we get it back. Okay, so that's how you can protect your GraphQL endpoint. So one more thing I'm gonna do actually, and this will be the last thing I'll do, is for at least just this video for setting it up, I'm gonna go ahead and do a couple things. So we're gonna go over to app module.ts, and inside GraphQL module, we're gonna do use global prefix, set that to true. So you can see right now we're at /GraphQL. If I refresh, it's going to say cannot get. Because we're using the global prefix, we now need to go to /API/GraphQL. Okay, so now if you have an API, if you have your client, like your React app, if it were to request, the GraphQL API, you would have to do /API/GraphQL. Okay, and you'll notice that the query is different here. Well, you can see that I actually have some stuff already here because I was using GraphQL for a different thing. But yeah, like I said, I can just do query, get user, and then get the ID, and bam, get the back. Okay, so I'm gonna do that, and I'm also gonna do one more thing, and this has to do with cores. So I'm gonna go ahead and enable cores for the future video, because if we were to make a request from our localhost port 3000 to port 3001, because right now our app is our API is running on port 3001, a different port compared to our React app. So we're going to need to enable cores, and that's HTTP, not HTTPS for localhost. Okay, so the origin is going to be port 3000 or whatever port your React app is running on, and we need to make sure we set credentials to true. And then we're also going to go ahead and inside the GraphQL module, or yeah, right inside the for root, we're also going to set cores over here, and we're going to do origin, and then HTTP localhost port 3000. So I think you need to do both actually for it to work. So I think this should be the bare minimum setup for literally all of our GraphQL. So in future videos, once we actually get to setting up all the backend stuff, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and build out our GraphQL API. And we are literally not even going to write a single, we're not even actually going to be using any controllers. The only control, like I said, we're going to have is the auth controller, but everything else we're going to do it through GraphQL. Okay, but yeah, that's going to be pretty much it. So in the future video, we're going to use this whole repository as a base point for our application. So hopefully you guys like this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Peace out.